finally, when we were old enough, he invited us up, and we got into an old 1990s truck and drove 3,000 kilometers into the wilderness. And we finally arrived there in the Yukon, and we're just blown away by the scale of mushrooms on these racks and in these dryers. It's like this mushroom gold rush.
You walk away from it going like, that actually happened. Traveling way out in the middle of nowhere on your own, trying to find this elusive thing, and when you find it, you bring it back, you get rewarded for it. The first time doing this was surreal.
So we're going to share with you a story from about a decade ago now. Growing up, I spent a lot of time harvesting mushrooms. When I was at that age, I didn't realize picking 500 pounds of pine mushroom buttons in a day. I thought that was normal. I would go out with all my brothers, and I didn't realize that was out of the ordinary. But we spent most of our time harvesting chanterelles and temperate rainforest mushrooms when I was younger. My father, Randy, who you see here on our channel, he had made a career out of wild harvesting. And one of the main harvests he would do was the morel mushroom. He would chase the morels all around North America on the previous year's wildfires, where they grow in abundance, just the 1 year afterwards for the most part. And so finally, when we were graduated from high school and old enough, he invited us up.
I'm Alex, and my parents introduced me to picking when I was like 5. The funny thing is, they were introduced to picking by Randy. The stories from Randy, just hearing these crazy stories over the years, about landscapes and people and giant mushroom harvests, and it really, when you don't know what it's like and all you've heard is stories, it really paints these drastic big pictures in your mind. Unlike most of the time when that happens, it more than lived up to those crazy expectations.
Before doing morels, I had done some commercial scale pine mushroom seasons as an adult that weren't just picking on the weekends with my family, but never morels at that stage. And so the first year we were invited up was quite an iconic year in Canada here. We were basically told to bring what we can carry on our backs and head to the north to pick these mushrooms, because the price was high that year. And Randy was already up in the Yukon territory running a massive scale mushroom drying operation. I got some of my friends together, one of those people being Alex, and he'd harvested mushrooms with me since the time I was younger. And we got into an old 1990s truck and drove 3,000 kilometers into the wilderness. We were traveling from the US-Canada border on Vancouver Island all the way up into the middle of the Yukon territory, over 3,000 kilometers.
And I traveled this massive distance. On the trip up there, I was keeping a journal.
Alex had been taking a journal. He's writing down like all these sights and things he's seeing, counting all the bears and drawing the different tamarack trees and all this stuff. And he's got this long list of journal entries, and
I was drawing pictures of like the mountain ranges and old burns, porcupines, wolverines, lynx, moose, deer, many, many bears. Around the time we arrived and started picking, I just totally forgot about any more entries.
As soon as we got to the mushrooms later in the season, the last entry was just all capitals, Morels.
Capital letters, Morels. And my mind was just elsewhere after that.
And we finally arrived there in the Yukon after about 4 16-hour days of driving, sleeping in the truck, sitting up. I would think I was 19 or 20 years old. We get to the Yukon and we drive into this old property down this long driveway in the absolute middle of nowhere. It was the only property for 100 kilometers in any direction. And it was a historic site. So on this property there was different aged cabins going back to the Klondike Gold Rush. In the field on this property, Randy was there running this huge scale mushroom drying operation. So immediately we arrive and we're just blown away by the scale of mushrooms on these racks and in these dryers. And that season, he was having record days of drying 9,000 pounds of morels brought to his station in a day, in a 24-hour period. We'd missed the first half of the season, so we just walked right into it, right off the deep end. And we kind of thought he was going to show us how to harvest morels and take us out, but he was too busy.
The veterans like Randy and some of the other guys were telling us to get out there like the next day.
He basically told the five of us, head down to the Yukon River, you'll find a camp, and they'll tell you what to do.
So we did.
We head down, and we drive into this spot along the huge raging Yukon River, this mighty river. There's a camp of probably 500 people at least in one camp.
And it was this big camp full of like dusty, dirty pickers, and there's a couple buying stations. There would pop up like food cart.
And all along the river there's these 20 or 30 tin skiffs on either side just lined up, and it's like this mushroom gold rush. We go up, and we had a designated boat driver who was assigned to us through the company that we were kind of working with. We asked them, though, how much is a boat ride? And, the other side of the river is only 100 meters across or so. And it's $20 a ride each way, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. So we all climb into this 20-foot-long lund, and with all of our pack boards, the backpacks we carry our gear with, and we're rookie morel pickers. We had experience picking mushrooms, but never morels. So everybody's kind of looking at us. We looked pretty green at the time. And we showed up at this awkward time when the conicas, or natural morels that grow on the burn, had kind of stopped producing for the year. And so there was this little bit of a mid-season lull. And everybody was waiting for the later stage fire morels to start. They were kind of looking at us like we were crazy, heading across this river with 5 or 6 empty baskets each.
We kind of looked like teenagers. We were really fresh, but we had our gear in our baskets, and we were walking in with all this false confidence. And you could see them all looking out of their tents at us like, who are these kids? That day was crazy. It was trial by fire. You hear stories about the mighty Yukon River, but it is the mighty Yukon River. Like, this thing is fast and deep and wide. He sends us across the river in this little skiff.
We sail across the river, we get off on the other side, and it's just this blackened environment, this burn, which is actually sort of beautiful once you're there for a while. But at first, it was just stepping into another world, an alien environment, and that burn had burned really hot.
We're told to just keep walking down this road until we reach a barrel, and after that we can start picking.
We were just told, walk until you see the barrel and the guy with the shotgun, then you can pick. And so there was this long sort of quad trail in the white ash. It was actually the historic Klondike Gold Rush Trail. It just happened to burn right through that area. So we're walking literally on the old Klondike Gold Rush Trail.
Didn't take long before you realized you were pretty deep in the middle of nowhere, and you had no real idea where you are. All you have is your compass to get back.
And we passed the barrel. And at first we were kind of intimidated, and we didn't have all the gear we carry now, all the GPS and all those things. We just had a compass and our own navigation. And we start picking in these lines, and we're getting a few, but not many, and they're not looking so good. They're the older mushrooms. And we see these ponds way in the distance. And we knew, we were experienced enough with picking other mushrooms, we knew to head towards water. So we walk towards those ponds, and sure enough, all around them is fire morels, the Morchella tomentosa, the blonde.
All you can think about and do and focus on is where are they, and how do I get them, and where's more, and it's pretty unreal feeling.
And then we met back up on the quad trail maybe 8 hours later at the most, and we all had 4 or 5 baskets, which was really good in a competitive burn, because on that road in, there was little camps everywhere in the ash, people just camping out there for weeks at a time in the middle of this wilderness area.
We ended up coming back with a pretty decent haul for our first day, and it was super exciting. I knew a little bit about the concept of the fire morels, And we started finding some of those near the end of the day, and that's what most of the mushrooms were. The naturals were kind of going, they're blowing out and getting old.
And so we hike out, and we're all proud of ourselves with these big pack boards, and we're walking down this winding Yukon trail, and there's these plumes of white ash coming off the back of our feet as we're walking. You can tell where there's people back behind you and in front of you because there's these plumes of ash from how hot it burned there.
And I don't think anybody brought enough water. And, you know, it's a dry, like, moisture sapping ecosystem environment. So thirsty. Finally got back to the boat launch on the far side of the river and just collapsing down to the edge of the river with a life straw and drinking from the river.
We get back to the river and we kind of set our pack boards down, and this was pretty good haul for us at that year, which was great for our first time picking morels. And then all of a sudden we have, you know, our boat driver and then all these other guys on that side of the river kind of coming over like, what the heck, these rookies went out and got mushrooms. As far as they knew, we were picking old rotten ones, but we weren't. We were picking beautiful blondes. And so they open up the lids of our basket. Now everybody's yelling all around, the fire morels have started.
Looked at what we had, and they were pretty surprised because they were just hanging out in camp waiting for the next flush to come. And I guess we had sort of found it. And yeah, everybody was kind of buzzing like, oh, there's fire morels.
So we had no idea. Like, we were just sort of by accident almost. And then we have to load our packs, all of our full pack boards, into this little tin boat, go back across the river. And because the boat rides are so expensive, we should have done 2 loads, but it would have been an extra $20 to drive 100 meters. So we tried to do it all in one load, which we barely succeeded on. Water was almost coming into the back of the boat, and getting those packs out of that boat with so many people was a bit haywire.
Sort of what you imagine it would have been like to be a gold miner back in the day, you know, traveling way out in the middle of nowhere, this camp constructed by people, and you're on your own trying to find this elusive thing, and when you find it, you bring it back, you get rewarded for it.
We bring our mushrooms back to where Randy was, and he's just all excited because we brought him some of the first blonde fire morels he'd seen for that season. And, you know, he's seeing everything on his drying racks. He sees all the mushrooms from the Yukon basically coming through there. So that was our first experience in a burn. Just immediately it hooked us from the moment we stepped into that burn.
When we arrived at the farm, we were told where to set up our camp, so we started setting up our camp. And after I had my tent set up and all my gear organized in one place, I realized I couldn't find my boots because we were going to go for a hike around the area. So Phil ended up lending me a pair of old, like, worn-in leather boots that were really good.
And I had made the mistake of wearing a pair of steel-toed and steel-shank hiking shoes, and they just destroyed my feet. Now, Alex had purchased the same shoes, and the day we got there after that drive, we were so exhausted from that long drive, and we just set up our tents and went to sleep that first night. And in that whole process of setting up, Alex had misplaced his boots, and so I had lent him my second pair of boots, which is like this old, you know, worn out pair. It turned out he probably got the better end of that deal because the steel shank shoes were much worse.
Ended up being a lot better than the ones I lost. Pretty uncomfortable sometimes sleeping in the tent. The ground's pretty uneven.
Our tent sleeping area was pretty terrible, and I remember Alex complaining about the ground not being very flat where his tent was. The following 2 weeks, basically, they would drop us off at 7 in the morning, and our pickup time was midnight. And that was because it was during the month of June in the Yukon where it doesn't get dark. So you can pick for these long hours. I had a brand new packboard I'd purchased for that season. It was a great packboard, but the hip straps had sort of a mesh on the inside. And because I hadn't broken it in yet, that mesh was rubbing on my hips for, 12 to 15 hours a day for 2 weeks hiking. And so I actually wore all the skin off of my hips But we continued to have some really good days picking, and the price was quite high. So it really did feel like we were just in this mushroom gold rush. And eventually it got to the point where we needed a break. We didn't have good facilities. We're living in the wilderness. We didn't have like a good shower system. We were just jumping in these ice cold creeks to shower. And I had probably 20 blisters on my feet and no skin left on my hips. Everybody else was hurting. Alex had uneven ground under his tent. So we decided to head to the iconic Dawson City, what was the capital of the Klondike Gold Rush.
Dawson City. Ah, hot water.
And we decided to just enjoy the Solstice party night in town. Everybody from the whole Morel industry and all these locals from the Yukon head to Dawson to watch the sun go down below the horizon and then come back up 5 minutes later on what's called the Dome in Dawson City, just above Dawson City. We decided to stay in town partying because we didn't want to drive up there. We wanted to go to the bar. It's like this classic Western style bar hop. It's all like the Wild West buildings, and we're just hopping from bar to bar.
From this one to that one, because they're all on this street, and they're all like this single street, like here, and they're all these old Western buildings.
And one of these bars is the iconic sour toe shot. And, you know, we kind of got sucked into this tourist attraction. I think the Yukon locals laugh at tourists who come up there and do that. So you can look it up online, but the sour toe is like, it's an actual human frostbitten toe that's in like a pickled jar. It's disgusting. And you put it into a glass of whiskey and you drink it. And the rule is, there's this saying, it's you can take it fast or you can take it slow, but your lips must touch this toe. That's the rule. There's been a number of times where people have swallowed the toe, and so there's like a $2,000 fine or something if you eat the toe. I don't know who's doing that, but somebody's been eating these toes. Friend Jake goes first, bravely went first, and he sort of slowly, tortuously looks at the toe, and he's looking that toe right in the nail. And he just tortuously drinks it with the whiskey. And I'm looking at him like, well, that looked rough. And then our friend Ben went next, I think. And he knew to go faster after watching Jake, but he decided to swish his glass. You can see all these little particles coming out of this black, jagged, cut-off toe. I was lucky I went third. I went as fast as I could, took the shot. So Alex is watching this whole thing go down, and he was the only smart one in the group. He's looking at us like, you guys are idiots. I'm not doing that. After Dawson, we went back, we harvested again for maybe another week. And we only had about 3 weeks there that first season. So as we're packing up to leave for the season, most of us had cleaned up our tents and all the gear, and Alex was the last person to pick up his tent, just by chance. And so he picks up his tent, and we're all standing there sort of watching this.
I lifted up my tent, and
under his tent is his pair of boots that he lost.
There's my boots.
We're all sitting there laughing because it looked like he'd been sleeping on his missing boots all season.
Some people think that I was sleeping on my boots, and some people think it was the big clods of grass roots. But we'll never know.
Immaculate brand new boots at the very end of the season. But again, he was lucky because he was wearing the boots that weren't as bad. The steel shanked ones, which he'd lost under his tent, were much worse to hike in. So maybe he did that on purpose. And so we started the long drive home, and on the way home we stopped at the beautiful Liard Hot Springs and sat in the hot springs and just sort of let everything sink in, this whole experience. It's been just a huge part of our lives since then.
The first time doing this was surreal. Every year, I want to do it again and again and again. One of the interesting things is like the whole picture is like something you hear in stories, and then you walk away from it going like, that actually happened. And it's interesting. It was life-changing to sort of see that there's still things out there that are like that.
Wanted to share this story with you, and express how grateful I am for that opportunity and just how exciting that was. And even though doing this is so difficult and isn't always very profitable for us, it's a huge gamble a lot of the time, we do it because we absolutely love it, and we love working in the bush and all the experiences that come along with that. Thanks for watching.